Hey y'all, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I know I'm looking crazy. I just walked upstairs from the fitness center downstairs and got my workout in, but I made the mistake of watching a video. This was a video of a white man that was complaining. He was livid, in fact, about some questions that were asked of his sons. He had a son that was 9 years old, 7 years old. His wife, their mother, took them in for their annual physical for youth sports, school, etc. That's what we parents do. Now, he was livid because the medical professional that walked into the room asked the child, "Do you identify as boy, girl, non-binary, or gender fluid?" Okay. He was livid that the question was asked. Okay. Now, let me preface all this by saying I'm a parent to similar age sons, 12 and 9. And I don't tell people how to raise their kids because I don't want to be told how to raise my kids that I gave birth to. And I want to give parents some things to think about. Number one, the medical community has been working to ensure that kids also have advocacy skills, because what we do know is that oftentimes, and this happens on a number of levels, parents will push things on their children that is not true for that child. And that can be older children, adult children. We're not talking about babies that can't speak for themselves. We're talking about children that can think for themselves, and parents still treat them as if they're furniture and they don't have a mind or humanity of their own. So the medical community is trying to do that. That's number one. Number two, the answer was pretty simple to an adult, and I would suggest the answer is pretty simple to a kid. A kid knows whether they identify as a boy or a girl, and if they've never heard of those other two words that the medical professional brought up. So if you've never heard of the words, then you probably don't identify as that. Seems pretty logical to me, right? Okay. Third, the child may speak to the medical professional when you may step away or they may have some concerns. The medical professional can see non-verbally if there are concerns about discrepancies about what you identify your child and how your child identifies themselves. This is the reason why, yes, based on my research that I did 100 years ago, kids were waiting to come out until college, or kids were waiting to self-identify as whatever they were in college because they were finally out from under their parents' roof. Or they felt more comfortable in high school because they felt they had more choices, or they found community there because there were other students that felt similarly. Let me give you some surprising things to think about. I've never talked to either of my sons about gender non-binary ever before my son, my 12-year-old Trey, came in the house and said, "Hey, Mom, this is my friend, fill in the blank, and they identify as non-binary." So trust and believe, your kids are learning about these words before you think they are, and they're learning about them outside of the home. What you have the responsibility of often doing, and this goes with every subject, not just this subject, is that when your kids hear certain words outside the home, as a parent, we're educators. Let's be clear. We keep them safe, we keep them fed, we keep them clothed, and we keep them educated. Now, you can educate them in whichever direction you want to, but don't think that they're not learning things outside of the home that they're not going to bring back. So to that gentleman that was livid, you don't get livid when a medical professional comes in and uses a medical term that your kid has never heard before. And then you're responsible for explaining to them, this is what fill in the blank is, right? So I've never, ever consented to a community, to a country, to a globe that is anti-information. I will never consent to that. And some of us as parents, we need to think about whether we are censoring our kids' education, mostly out of fear, because we assume that they're going to take on that information as their personhood rather than simply learning and appreciating it. So think about that the next time you think about information. And it can be all kinds of information. Just because your kid goes to school and learns math, that does not necessarily mean they're become a mathematician. That doesn't mean that, they're learning astronomy, that they're going to become an astronomist. They're learning this information to be aware of what's going on in the world. So to that gentleman and people like that gentleman, not telling you how to parent, but I am telling you to think, consider, think about the logic, think about how you may be harming your kid because your kid is unaware of certain things. Let me give you another great example that's really important, especially in the conversation about race. In my house, we don't use the N-word. And so when my then 10-year-old comes home and says, "Mommy, what does the N-word mean?" That doesn't mean that we're going to subscribe to that language in our house. That doesn't mean that we are that type of trope or caricature in my house. But it gave me a great opportunity to educate my kids about what the N-word has meant, still means to this day, how it's been a slur, and how it's unacceptable to people who feel strongly about equity and inclusion. It was an opportunity. We still don't use that word. We still don't subscribe to it. If someone calls us that, we don't know who the hell you're talking to because that's not us. Okay? But they now know about it and how to position themselves in relationship to that word. Maybe the same thing could happen with boy, girl, non-binary. Education. Learn something. Teach something, but learn something.